My name is Issac Egge. I'm an advisor at Confluence High School here in Auburn. I've been in the world of education formally for the last 8 years. Prior to that, I worked for 15 years in humanitarian aid around the world, but have always kind of operated in the general realm of education. It's just kind of taken on different forms throughout the years. Have 2 daughters and race bikes semi-professionally on the side. And soon realized that I was a teacher and just learned by doing. It was by accident initially. I was about to graduate from college down at Long Beach State, selfishly wanted to travel the world and found this thing called the Peace Corps. And had no idea what it was, and before I knew it, I was sent to a little island off the coast of Venezuela, given the keys to a brick building where young men were supposed to be taught vocational arts, carpentry, masonry, plumbing, electrical. Had a little bit of background in that area, and soon realized that I was a teacher and just learned by doing. And so that kind of started my journey in education, and which ultimately has brought me to where I am today. The purpose of education. I think there's the purpose of the system's purpose is to further structures of society. The purpose of education should be to help us all better understand who we are in the midst of this crazy world and how we can find fun, freedom, and belonging. So I think the ideal purpose is very different than the current purpose of education, which may not be so positive. Well, it certainly isn't a teacher. I think everyone is an educator. The most important educator in the world is a mother. That job starts the moment a baby emerges. That's the world's most important educator. From that point, it's anyone who wants to take others under their wing, wants to improve humanity's standing. It could be, even today, I was at a mechanic shop and you have a guy who's elbow deep in an engine who's wanting to take some of our students under his wing and to teach them. He would never think of himself as an educator, yet he absolutely is. I think too often we see teachers as educators, and we realize that only a fraction of learning happens in schools. Learning happens everywhere. And so in a way, we're all educators. It's just whether or not we choose to kind of engage in that way. The world. Everyone's responsible for all children. So often, with parents as busy as they are, or unfortunately in some cases non-existent, schools are asked to do everything. They're asked to feed the kids, help clothe the kids, provide manners for the kids, you name it, from A to Z. And the schools are failing as a result. So it's everyone's responsibility. And if people began to understand that we're all in this together and we need to look out for each other and help educate, specifically the youth, boy, this world would be a much different place. It's a very good question. I struggle with this every day. I'm fortunate enough to have 2 daughters, age 11 and 14, who are very smart young women. I've taken them all over the world to see from the ghettos of Medellin to the middle of Switzerland. And as a result, they have understood that learning happens everywhere. While their teachers are good people, I'm deeply frustrated with what they call an education that's being provided to my daughters. It's very singular focused. It's very narrowly focused. Nowhere in the world does math, English, and science live separately. But yet where my daughters are taught a math class and a science class and an English class, as if those things don't operate in harmony, which they do in the real world. So my struggle with my daughters is to supplement their education. I have to play my role. And I encourage my whole family and our extended friends to do the same for my children as I offer that for their children. So it's that whole old adage of it takes a village. And I think once we reroot in that concept, we're going to be a lot better off. My mother was a teacher for over 30 years. And she started teaching in Watts in 1967 as one of the only Caucasian teachers there. And she fought, as did my father, who was for a short period a teacher there as well. It's where they met. They both quickly understood that the system was deeply flawed and it was furthering racial injustice. It was actually... My belief is that schools may be one of the most destructive forces in our society. I don't know if there is anything in our society that harms this many children so frequently. I got that concept from my mother, who for years has said, this is rotten at its core. I love these kids. I'm committed to their well-being, but the system is broken. And so I heard that from her for years and years. And then as I've gotten deeper into education, I've seen that firsthand. That the system is designed to maintain the status quo, not to uplift humans. And so that's where I find myself now, is trying to find ways to fix that. Vanilla. My education was just vanilla. It was designed to not inspire me. It was designed to... It was boring. My education, I remember almost nothing. I remember a couple professors in college who would take me out to drink beer. I remember sports. I remember girlfriends. But I don't remember what I learned. As the saying goes, like, you won't be remembered for what you taught somebody. You'll be remembered for how you made them feel. That's what they'll remember, the feelings. So I don't remember much about my education at all. And I think that speaks volumes. Who should be the real decision makers when it comes to education? Ideally, the communities. You know, there should be more of a burden on communities to engage with schools. I call it a burden, but just a responsibility. And we do that in a way. There's a thing called LCAP, which local control and accountability, which brings in members of the community to make recommendations to school systems as to how they should work. I'm not sure it's very effective. We have democracy in action through school boards. It's full of warts. You know, it kind of works, but it doesn't really work great. So often people making decisions about schools are the people who school really worked for. And so they're going to design the system in a way that worked for them. And in that, we forget about the millions, the billions worldwide whose school hasn't worked for. And so I don't really have a great answer for you at this point, because Ideally, I'd like to see those who school didn't work for really have an equal voice in the process. How that happens, I don't know. Because so often those are the people who are going to stay away from the process, right? If school sucked for you, are you really going to re-engage in your older years to try to improve the system? No, you're going to say, screw that. The system sucked. Didn't serve me. I'm out. So I don't know. Ideally, everybody should be involved. I will say I think it is highly problematic that bureaucrats in Sacramento would be making detailed decisions for how schools are funded and supported and curriculum and that sort of thing. You have a state that's larger than most countries, and you have folks in Sacramento making decisions for what we do here in Auburn. So I think that's problematic. Absolutely, politics dominates education. The hierarchy, the bureaucracy in education, while many claim that their intention is to help the young people, many of them are just ambitious humans that are in it for themselves. While I think educators should be paid more, those at the higher ends of education make far more money than they ever should. Most decisions associated with schools and school districts and the state are highly political. And when you are highly political, you're often catering to the higher ends of our society, not thinking about the bottom rungs, because so often the bottom rungs aren't voting. They're not involved in community events and decisions with schools, so they're the forgotten. And so when something is hyper-political, oftentimes it's another way of saying that is, this is the game of the elite. Oh gosh, if I were to make a training video for the school district, well, I do this. I do a lot of consultation with schools around the Western United States. And I often just start out with basic, like, why are you here? Why are you in this game? How was school for you? What do you think is wrong with the system? You know, you start out asking questions of the people who are involved. So often, it's just humans. We bring our baggage into all sorts of different games. And to be an effective teacher, so often you kind of have to see what your biases are. You have to understand your emotional tendencies, why you react to certain things the way you do. And so with any kind of a training I would do, and do, you start off with the individuals first, of kind of flushing out, like, why are you playing in this pond? What do you want to get out of this? And are you an agent of change? Because at the end of the day, we should all hope for our school systems to be filled with change agents, people who really want to improve this game. Yeah, absolutely. Confluence is dramatically different than most schools. The first indicator of this is you ask any of our students, do you like this place? Like, I love this place. Then you ask them, when was the last time you felt that about a school? Well, never. Well, why do you feel that way? Well, y'all see me as a human. You all respect my positive attributes, but you also respect my negative attributes. Like, what's up? Nobody's getting suspended here. Nobody's getting yelled at. You know, you keep asking me, what do I want? Like, what? So it's the idea, what makes Confluence different is that we shut up and we just put the right questions in front of students to help them realize who they are, to help them realize that their aspirations and their dreams are legit. And then we're just there to kind of help them around the edges. We also put a lot of different kinds of pressure on our students. Not pressure to get a better grade on that math test. That's irrelevant to us. It's the pressure to push yourself into uncomfortable places. I have, there's a poster in my classroom, and you've probably heard this, but life begins at the end of your comfort zone. So Confluence, if anything, pushes each of our students out of that place that they've been comfortable in into kind of a new understanding of who they are and how they can engage with the world. That's it in a nutshell. I always not worry, but I get a little uneasy about traditional teachers and educators and even community members coming into our school, or parents sometimes, because they lack the context. They're accustomed to normal school where you can't say certain things. You can't, I'll put it to you this way. Almost nothing's off limits in our classrooms. We focus probably more on mental health than we do on academics. Because if you're not right here, if you're not feeling okay, you can't accomplish anything. So we cover some really gnarly ground, some really uncomfortable topics. I've had a lot of, frankly, horrific experiences walking side by side with my students, who are co-pilots, really. I don't even like the word student. We see our people, our learners, as humans first, not as subjects. And I think that's a big part of what makes us different. Absolutely, it would work on a grander scale. And it's starting, it's happening. When you look, especially in the era of COVID, you ask any school to honestly talk about who's thriving and who's struggling. I should say COVID in general has revealed the warts of our society. It's shut down businesses, maybe because, and I never want to see any business shut down, but some businesses have struggled because of flaws, the internal flaws. COVID revealed that. Now, some businesses have shut down because it's just hard times. Schools are struggling because that traditional format never really worked for most students. It works for some, but not most. So we are finding real success, even amidst the struggles of our day. We engage the larger community as co-educators. Most of our students have internships in various places around the community. So we're not the only ones responsible. The community is increasingly engaged in the educational process. So if schools really start to do that on a larger scale, you then it goes back to one of your original questions about who's responsible for education, right? Who is an educator? Well, our whole community is. So our method helps engage the community in the educational process. And then it builds more understanding for what needs to change in the school systems. Then you're going to get more people running for school boards. You're going to get more people at school-related events who may not otherwise have come. And then you're going to start to see equity truly flourish and grow when more hands are involved. So that's part of what we do at Confluence. Yes, there's always trade-offs. Our students, our graduates' success rate at junior college sucks. It's not good. And that's something that we've focused so much energy on hands-on learning, on kind of career cultivation, on-the-job training, that we have not done well with study skills, with the more traditional aspects of learning, that if you're going to go on to into college, you do need some of these basic skills. And so we have not focused enough time and energy on that, which is something that gnaws at me. I want to be good at everything. I want to offer everything. But that's been a definite trade-off. It does. And as they say, crap rolls downhill. And so what the universities establish as a norm flows down to community colleges as a norm, flows down to high schools as a norm, flows all the way down to kindergarten as a norm. What do they tell you about your kid in kindergarten? We just got to make sure they're prepared for first grade. Huh? Is my kid smiling? Are they happy? Well, we want to make sure language proficiency gets them into first grade. What do they say in first grade? I got to make sure they're ready for second grade. As if there's just some high stakes, gnarly, make it or die kind of environment. That all rolls down from the university level. So we're talking about a systems issue here, not just high school or middle school. There's a much larger animal to wrestle with. Well, there's two approaches, right, to how to affect change. One is to nuke the whole system, right? I mean, there is the theory that burn down the whole house or burn the field before you replant, right, which is a traditional practice. Then, because that can be cataclysmic and really destabilize society, so maybe that's not the best route sometimes. But then there's what I'm trying to do is just be persistent about incremental change, so that you're always moving the ball a little bit further down the road. For many, even like myself, who are impatient, that doesn't bring change quick enough. But you chip at the foundation of a house long enough, eventually that house is going to fall, and then you're going to have to rebuild it. Oh, I talk about it nonstop. I have really great colleagues. My world experience has informed the way I see systems. And I don't mean this from an arrogant perspective, but I have had an opportunity to see humanity in its worst and its best. I've sat in some of the founding members of Google and YouTube in their offices and understand the lives that they live. I've spent time with the elite of Park City, Utah, or Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And then I've lived with families who have had their loved ones butchered in Rwanda, in people who are living in a state of quiet war on the border of Myanmar in Thailand. So I've experienced all of these different things that informs me about what injustice truly is. And so I'm driven in a way that really bothers a lot of people. Oftentimes people see me walk into a room that know me and they kind of cringe. But I'm cool with that. I do believe it's my responsibility to bring some discomfort to a broken system. Doesn't make me a lot of friends, but I don't really need friends like that. So do my colleagues see things as I do? They do believe that the system is broken. They do believe that we have to continue to work towards change. Our tactics are different. And I think that's a good thing, because none of us are the same. We all go about things a little bit different. Now, when we have colleagues in the past that haven't been on board, myself and a couple of my colleagues tend to get a little loud because we believe in what we're doing. Sometimes, because change is exhausting. When I say agents of change, I look for those people in our society, and because they're the ones that have endurance. Because everybody can dabble in change, and a lot of that's change to make you feel good, but very few are like holding firm and are really working towards improvement. Yeah, I think when money is the hub of change, which is typically the driver of change, it's monetary, it's financial, then we're always going to have problems. When human-centered change is the focal point of anything that happens, when we put the need of the human first, then we're talking about sustainable change. We're talking about real movement. And there can be plenty of money to be made in that process as well. But you put the dollar out front, humans lose 10 times out of 10 over the long haul. So that's part of what you see with the dysfunction of change and the constant change. Well, I think you can do both. I think you can have learning through experiences and a system. Because if the system values the individual, if the system, our society is increasingly going individualized. Google tailors things to who you are, for better or for worse, right? Your car adjusts to your posture. Everything is becoming individualized except education. And this is part of what we do at Confluence and many other schools are starting to do, is to develop individual learning plans so that the process is slightly different for every student. And so you're still learning by doing, you're learning through your own passions and your own interests and curiosities, but you're a part of a system. So I don't believe that the system itself is the problem. I think it's the way it's been designed. That's the problem. So the two can absolutely live in harmony, but it has to be human-centered in its design, which isn't always the case. Yeah, my advice for what you are undertaking is the structure expects you to give up. They look at you and go, you'll go away soon. This is just a fad for you. Because that's typically the case. Don't stop. It's like a dog on a bone. You don't let go until you get what you want. Know if you are guided by your heart and by good intentions and community thinking, you're on the right path. And you're going to hear no, 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 no. One of the greatest life skills you can learn, no matter your profession, is how to turn a no into a yes. Be relentless in your pursuit of what you want. Make people cringe when you walk into the room and go, God, here she is again. Oh, man, we better put on the seatbelt, And you charm them with smile and questions and always have a lot of compassion and empathy when possible. But then you just continue to drive towards what you're trying to achieve. And develop coalitions, because you can't do stuff alone. You always have to build coalitions. One person is easy to overrun. An army of passionate, driven people, that's a force that's tough to reckon with. So those are the two things. Be relentless in your pursuits, and form coalitions of change. And you're going to see amazing things occur. I think about the trade-offs. We don't have a prom. Is that important? We don't have traditional sports in that, you can't compete at the, in CIF events. Now, we have partnered with about 6 other schools like ours in the region and have developed 4 sports throughout the year. So we've tried to mitigate some of the impact that the trade-offs do have, because they're real. Our students that go to our schools generally, nationwide, don't have access to the greatest of food. Many students throughout the country throughout the world, the food they get at their school is some of the only meals they're going to have. I would love to see like legit meals, like a culinary program. Down in Manteca, there's a school called B-Tech. A friend of mine named Andrew runs a culinary program there. So the students are learning high-end culinary skills and are feeding the school at the same time. It's those type of innovations. So when you bring up trade-offs, there are trade-offs to the traditional form of school, but those trade-offs also could breed innovation like what Andrew is doing down at B-Tech in Manteca, right? So it just depends on how you look at those trade-offs. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it it would be hard to make like real change because things are just changing so often and it's hard to keep up with that sort of thing? And do you think that's why things are so messed up now? It's because it's just we're stuck in the same sort of way and nobody wants to put effort into making change. Does that make sense? That's such great advice, honestly. Like, yeah.
It's the same stuff they're telling you. I know it.
There's the way you said it. It's like, yeah, that totally makes sense. And it's great advice. I think we're done.
Cool.
Yay!
Yeah.
Well, it kind of makes you think, I guess, because then it's like you're still being, like, you're still being standardized, like, even when you do non-traditional stuff like that. But then it's like you got to prepare to go to college, but then is like college that kind of traditional thing that's trying to fit kids into like a mold. Do you know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
It all plays into each other, and it sucks so much.
It does.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to like even fathom, because like when you really dig deep into that kind of shit, it's like, whoa, there's like so much wrong over here, but then it causes this kind of crumble.
Yep.
And so like, I guess when we're trying to do this, it's like, where do we even start?
Well, my belief is that schools may be one of the most destructive forces in our society. And then as I've gotten deeper into education, I've seen that firsthand. That the system is designed to maintain the status quo, not to uplift humans. And so that's where I find myself now, is trying to find ways to fix that. I'm committed to their well-being, but the system is broken.